कृष्णो रक्षतु मां चराचरगुरुः कृष्णं नमस्ये सदा। कृष्णेनैव सुरक्षितोऽहमसकृत् कृष्णाय दत्तं मनः।
If we leave the interactions and go to the forest, by that we are losing both the grounds. In the forest also, if we sit for meditation or contemplation on the truth, we will not be able to meditate or contemplate because our mind will be given to the various worldly thoughts. That mind will not come away from that. And because we have left the interactions and come away to the secluded forest, we will not have the opportunity to purify ourselves through the interaction. So Bhagavad Gita says that let it be whatever you are doing, whatever be your interactions, you continue with that, but I am only asking you to change your attitude, the purpose for which you are getting involved in the activities, the purpose of the activities. You change your outlook, you change your vision, and that will make your whole life a pursuit. The world we will not be able to change, but we can certainly change ourselves. In Yoga Vasishtha, Vasishtha Deva says, Purne manasi sampurnam jagat sarvam sudhadravaihi upanad gudhapadasya nanu charmastrutaiva bhuhu. He says, Purne manasi, when the mind becomes full. When can the mind become full? Only when the mind is not glued to the fragmented appearances, likes and dislikes. When the mind is dissolved in the truth, the oneness of the truth, the one truth which is manifesting as many. Seeing the many, also we don't get lost from the one, then only the mind becomes full. It never desires for anything, it never hates anything, it never gets fragmented by the vision of the fragmented world. So Vasishtha Deva says, Purne manasi, the whole world becomes Sudhadravaihi sampurnam bhavati. The whole world becomes flowing with nectar. The whole world becomes nectarine. It is not the nectar is flowing in the world and you are seeing it, feeling it. The nectar is in your mind. The mind has become full. He gives the example, Upanat gudhapadasya nanu charmastrutaiva bhuhu. That we don't want to get in touch with dust. For that, are we going to cover the whole earth with leather? We cover our feet with leather, and with that we walk wherever we want. Our feet don't get in touch with the dust anymore. Like that, when our mind becomes full, then wherever we go, the world no more agitates us, punishes us. We are no more getting bound or affected by anything in the world. So, making the mind pure, uniform, from its fragmented state, from its selfish state, from its constrictions, the mind has to be taken to that. And for that, Bhagavad Gita says that each interaction, each thought, when we watch the thought, we have to correct the thought itself. When the thought is selfish, the thought is constricted, we have to watch our mind and correct it right at that point. Like that, if we proceed, then for us, the whole world will become nectarine. Not only that, Bhagavad Gita has presented various pursuits, or the pursuits from various angles. And in each case, he has developed it and taken it to its zenith, where it becomes the same as the Brahmanishtha or Brahmic knowledge as in the Upanishads. The Samatva pursuit, as we said, that remaining even in success and failure, in gain and loss, that Samatva pursuit will make our mind uniform, so much so that it will take us to that Brahmic realization. Why? We may know that Brahman is one and it is beyond one also, it is transcendental, it is uniform. There is no limitation, no form, no change at all in Brahman. Well, we may know it as a concept, but we are not able to feel that I am like that. It is because the mind is always getting hindered, getting affected by the likes and dislikes. So although we may know that my soul is Brahman and my soul is like this, but we will not be able to have the realization of that because my mind is getting affected by the world. So until by the pursuit of purification of the mind, by going beyond the likes and dislikes, by going beyond the attraction towards the likes and repulsion towards the disliked things, we will not be able to own up the uniformity of the Brahman, the uniformity, the oneness of the self, the all-pervading nature, the universality of the self. That is why we remain away from realization, knowing the truth, knowing all the Shastras also. We may read all the Vedas, all the Upanishads, everything we have mastered, we may even take by heart. But even then, the realization will not come until the mind is freed of its attraction and repulsion towards what it likes and what it dislikes. So Bhagavad Gita says, Ihaiva tairjita sargo yesham samya sthitam manaha nirdosham hi samam brahma tasmat brahmanite sthitaha. Ihaiva tairjita sargo. Sargaha means Srishti, the creation, the world. Ihaiva taihi jita sargaha. By them this world has been won over here itself, not after the body falls or anything. Remaining here itself in the world is won over. Tair jitaha sargaha. Ihaiva tair jitas sargo yesham samya sthitam manaha, whose mind is established in this samatva, whose mind is always prepared to accept anything that comes. That acceptance is always ready. He is ready to accept the success and failure. Yesham samya sthitam manaha nirdosham hi samam brahma tasmat brahmanite sthitaha. Tasmat brahmanite sthitaha. They are well established in Brahman also. Why he is saying like that? He says because Brahman is nirdosham samam. Brahman is the parakashta, the ultimate, the zenith of this samatva, where there is no limitation, no constriction, no affectation, no taint at all. Taking the mind beyond all the constrictions, we attain Brahman through the pursuit of samatva. Like that, each concept Bhagavad Gita presents, there is a revolutionary note in it. Suppose yajna. Yajna is generally regarded as, it used to be regarded as only a sacrifice in fire, that it is a ritual. We have a fire and where we sacrifice the materials. This was the concept of yajna. It was a ritualistic concept. Bhagavad Gita has taken this concept of yajna to a universal dimension. He says that the whole nature is a yajna of the universal Lord. Because here everything is done without any desires as an offering to the universal Lord. Only we human beings suffer from desires and spoil the yajna. The moon is going around the earth is going around the sun, the galaxies, the various other things, everything, so much of activity is there in this universe. But all these are taking place in harmony with the fundamental harmony of nature. It is as if an offering to the universal Lord, to the universal yajna of the Lord. Like that, when we understand that our life is also an offering to the universal Lord, then whatever we do with this yajna vision, with this yajna attitude, it liberates us. It no longer binds us. So this yajna also can be taken to that level where it makes us liberated, considering all our work, every day, every step of our life, every thoughts as an offering to the Lord, we get liberated through the yajna. So like that, each concept Bhagavad Gita has taken to a universal level, to a revolutionary new vision. Like that, we can also think of the synthesis that Bhagavad Gita has done. It's a great synthesis. We often talk about Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, Dhyana Yoga. Actually, Bhagavad Gita is a synthesis of everything. Here it is clearly stated that doing karma is not karma yoga. It is the yoga attitude which makes your karma a yoga. If you do with the yoga attitude, any karma becomes yoga. Not only that, to do that karma with the yoga attitude, you have to have knowledge. Without the knowledge of the truth, you cannot perform the activities, cannot make them a yoga in the light of yoga. Whatever we do, it has to be on the basis of the knowledge of the truth, and then all karma will become yoga. Similarly, bhakti, Bhagavad Gita clearly says that the bhakti, the pinnacle of bhakti is jnana, and the pinnacle of jnana is bhakti. The shuddha bhakti and the shuddha jnana, there is no difference at all. This comes out in a beautiful manner in the 18th chapter towards the end. And he has finally, the last message Bhagavad Gita has given is surrender. He has not said, we often say that we have surrendered to God, but we don't know what we have surrendered to. Without knowing God, whether He exists or not, how can we surrender to God? So the surrender takes a real applied meaning only when the God appears before us as the Guru. And we have to follow Guru's words, where we find it very difficult. And the surrender becomes difficult then. So at the end, after ending everything, Krishna says, now I have told you everything, even the secrets of this yoga I have told you. Knowing all that, you do whatever you like. But then again, he comes back to his message. He says, but Arjuna, I love you and you are like my own replica. So I cannot but tell you the truth. Then he says, Manmana bhava mad bhaktaha madhyaji Maam Namaskuru. He says that you consider me as the Lord and become unified with me. That is the highest and the most secret of all secrets. That is the highest yoga I can tell you. And Arjuna was able to do it, although not always, but finally in each cases he could do it. If we look into the Mahabharata, we will find at the end of each day there would be a lot of fight amongst the Pandava brothers, and Arjuna also will be agitated and promising various things, doing various things. But Krishna would appear and ask him, give him the guidance, and Arjuna will follow the guidance as Krishna said. So there are a lot of shlokas like this where Arjuna is agitated, but he ends each lecture with that, but Krishna, you are a knower of truth. Whatever you say, I will do. And he does it also. Days after days, nights after nights in Mahabharata, we find this. So it was a right direction given to the right disciple. So Krishna, only when the disciple can have the confidence of the teacher, he is so much devoted to the teacher that unquestioningly he is ready to follow the teacher's words, then only this surrender becomes possible, and the teacher stands before him as the Lord himself, and the surrender becomes complete. In Bhagavad Gita, it is shown through all the methods that everything finally leads to this single state of liberation. In liberation we come to know that we are surrendered, there is nothing to surrender. The Prakriti is performing its own role just like a yajna, and we are surrendered alone. So this surrender concept also is given a beautiful synthetic meaning there. Through all the processes, all the prescriptions, finally we are led to this surrender and to this liberation. Although we are calling it revolutionary, but Sri Krishna himself says that what I am presenting is not revolutionary at all. It was there with the kings of our land. In the 4th chapter beginning, he says, Imam vivasvate yogam proktavanaham avyayam vivasvan manave praha manurikshvakave brabit evam parampara praptam imam rajarshayo viduhu sakale neha mahata yogo nashta parantapa. He says that I had given this yoga to Vivasvan, the king of the old, and he had given to his next generation Manu, and like that and like that. Through parampara, it has been coming down. It was with the rajas, with the kings. The kings could not have ruled the kingdom with their welfare orientation properly, with righteousness, unless they had this knowledge with them. So the kings have been ruling with this knowledge, but with the passage of time, power corrupts, and the kings got corrupted, and it has gone from the kings. That is why this Mahabharata war has come about, and through this war we have to re-establish this yoga. We have to re-establish the rule in the hands of the kings who will be Rajarshis again. So let us not forget the fundamental point for which we said that Bhagavad Gita is a revolutionary message. The fundamental point there is, generally in all spiritual practices we consider the worldly interactions and performance of worldly duties to be a hindrance. Bhagavad Gita tells us very clearly that not only that it is not a hindrance, it is an instrument towards liberation. And the method is to do whatever we are doing, but with a completely transformed attitude. This is very clear right from the beginning, from the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita. After the description of the battlefield and the different people, Arjuna starts preaching Krishna about dharma and adharma, because he had the knowledge of moral codes and he was a righteous person. The first chapter is really speaking a lecture of Arjuna to Krishna, not Krishna to Arjuna, where Arjuna is telling him that if he is done, this will happen, that will happen, this is dharma, this is adharma, etc. And it climaxes in the 44th verse, where he says, Aho vata mahat papam kattum vyavasita vayam yad rajya sukhalobhena hantum swajanamudyataha. He says that we are out to commit a great sin, that for rajya sukhalobhena, for the greed for enjoying the kingdom, the happiness which comes out of the kingship, we are about to kill our own people. Hantum swajanam udyataha. We are out to kill our own people. Now, if it is so, then it is a mahapapa. What Arjuna said, his mindset. We have to understand what was Arjuna's mindset here. Then only we will understand what is the transformation needed and where will it go. So here the mindset is a constricted mindset, which is looking for gain, looking for selfish gain, selfish happiness and all. He is saying, Yat Rajya Sukha Lobhena. That means he is assuming that by fighting the war, if he wins, then he will get the kingdom. If he gets the kingdom, then it will produce Sukha, happiness. And for the greed for this happiness, for this greed for this kingship, they are fighting the war. In his mind, he was thinking that this war will be won, and after winning, when we have the kingship, we will be happy. If we go into it, actually we find that there are a lot of missing points here. Suppose we are fighting the war, we may not win. We may die in the process, we may not get the kingdom. Even if we get the kingdom, that kingdom will produce sukha, it may not. And for a good king, a kingship is never for happiness. It's a great responsibility. It is like a crown of thorn. A good king, in our Yoga Vasishta, so many kings have been described who could not stay on the throne because their mind was being punished, because they have to administer punishment, and it was not like our courts these days that the case will go on for 10 years, 15 years like that. Some report will come, he has to look into the report, he has to give a judgment right there and then. In some cases he himself will be beheading the person. It is directly on the spot. and suppose the king gives a wrong judgment, then how much will his heart be punished? Not only that, the criteria of a good king in our country was that the judge who is administering the punishment, he should feel the pain more than the punished. Do you get my point? The judge who is administering the punishment, who is giving the punishment, in giving the punishment, his mind should feel more pain than the actual punished. That means although he is giving the punishment, but he is feeling for him, he is feeling for his family as if they are his own. And with that kind of torture, he had to punish the wrongdoers. Suppose he does not punish the wrongdoers, then the criminals will sit on the good people will not be able to live well, only the criminals will flourish. The king has to punish the wrongdoers, but at the same time, his universality of the vision makes his heart so soft that he feels that the punishment is given to himself. That was the code of conduct. So in such a case, a good king, how can his life be happy? It was not at all happy. Even if you look into Rama's life, was it a happy life? It was only suffering and suffering and suffering. So the kings particularly needed this knowledge to be on the throne, to course through this suffering. Now, here the mindset of Arjuna is constricted. He is thinking that he is fighting the war for Rajya Sukha Lobha, that the greed for winning the kingdom and having happiness out of it. This was the mindset where Krishna started speaking to him. And you can see that after the yoga, what becomes the mindset? That is in 18th chapter, 17th verse. Yasya nahankrito bhavo buddhir yasya na lipyate hatvapi sa iman lokan nahanti na nibadhyate. Yasya na ahankrito bhavo buddhi yasya na lipyate. One who does not have the egoistic bhava, that the constricted mindset, who is universal in his approach, in his vision, and buddhir yasya na lipyate, whose buddhi is not tainted by this apparent smallness, me and mine, the constrictions, the selfishness, etc. Whose buddhi is illumined with the true nature of the self, with the universality of the self, with the surrender, and whose mind is no more thinking in terms of kartritva and bhoktritva, that I have done this, I will do this, and I will enjoy this, I will suffer this, I have suffered this, I will enjoy this. All these things are coming from kartritva and bhoktritva. Yasya nahankrito bhavaha, it means that his mind is freed of kartritva and bhoktritva, and the buddhi is freed of the lepana, of the constrictions. Yasya nahankrito bhavo buddhir yasya na lipyate hatvapi sa iman lokan nahanti na nibadhyate. Even if he kills the whole world, then also he has not killed anybody really, and he never gets bound by his work. It's a figurative expression, not that he is going to kill the whole world, but there the killing is for the purpose of truth. Maybe here what Krishna tells Arjuna is that you are not fighting the war for your selfish aim of winning the kingdom and enjoying the kingdom, but I have asked you to fight the war because the rulership everywhere has got corrupted. The kings are corrupt. This way the society will soon perish, soon be destroyed. To save the civilization, to save the society, I have come to establish the righteous rule on earth. And it is to establish the righteous rule that I have selected you for fighting the war. So you are fighting the war not for your selfish aim, for winning the kingdom or enjoying the kingdom, but to administer the society, to establish a righteous rule in the society. So with that idea, if you kill anybody, it is not that you are killing for any selfish motive, that you will incur any sin. the sin will not be there. Nahanti na nibadhyate. It is not just the sin. You will not have any bandhana out of this killing. What is the bandhana? What is the bondage? Truly speaking, that sin and punya, papa and punya, in spirituality, when a person becomes a spiritual seeker, the papa and punya change their meanings also. It is not like the usual ritualistic, moralistic meaning. When a person takes to spirituality, for him any constriction is papa. So if he does some very good work and becomes egoistic about it, very good social work I have done, and he becomes egoistic about it, it is papa, because it is constricting his mind, it is making his mind egoistic. Similarly, punya is whatever makes the mind expand, whatever liberates the mind, whatever takes the mind to a higher dimension, makes the mind subtle, expanded.